Last Friday, the Trump administration asked the Supreme Court to greenlight the deployment of National Guard troops in my home state of Illinois after the lower courts had temporarily blocked the deployment. In her decision, District Court Judge April Perry said the Trump administration has produced, and I quote, "no credible evidence that there is a danger of rebellion in Illinois." Rather, Judge Perry found that, quote, "the unnecessary deployment of military troops untrained for local policing will escalate tension and undermine the ordinary law enforcement activities of state and local entities." 3 judges on the Seventh Circuit Appeals Court, including one appointed by President Bush and another appointed by President Trump, considered that decision by the lower court and agreed with Judge Perry. They found, and I quote, "the facts do not justify the president's actions in Illinois. Political opposition is not rebellion." That panel is right. Last Saturday, I was part of the No Kings demonstration. We estimate there were 100,000 people in Grant Park, the Petroleum Band show. It was nonviolent. It was orderly. Oh, they were loud once in a while, but no one was involved in any sort of rebellion. They were exercising their constitutional rights to express their opinion about the policies of this government. I've been honored to represent the great state of Illinois for over 40 years in the Senate and the House. And yes, like every state, Illinois has its challenges, such as addressing crime. But for the last 2 decades, the murder rate in Illinois has been lower than the murder rates in Republican-led states like Missouri, Louisiana, and Alabama. And violent crime is down dramatically in the city of Chicago. We should work together to build on this success and reduce the crime rate even more. But the president's actions in sending in National Guard troops, even from the state of Texas to Illinois, is not about public safety, it's about politics. And his unjustified and unlawful attempts to deploy troops to Chicago and other American cities are a threat to our basic democratic institutions. The Supreme Court should reject the president's petition to use these troops in America. There is no emergency that justifies bypassing the regular appeals process and resolving this issue on the court's shadow docket without the full public scrutiny this issue deserves. Just last week, I received a heartbreaking message from one of my constituents, Petty Officer Second Class Jessica Windland, a hardworking provider at Lake County Health Department in Waukegan, Illinois. In her letter, Officer Windland mentioned that some of her patients have stopped showing up for their appointments because ICE officers are camping out in front of the facility. Picture it, if you will. People, families taking their children in for a doctor's appointment, afraid to go, leave their car, and walk the short distance to the clinic because ICE officials in their combat uniforms and masked in unmarked vehicles were lurking outside the clinic. She said, in what she wrote to me, "My patients have not been able to come to their medical appointments out of fear of being taken." These raids are impacting the ability of medical providers to provide basic family treatment. Jessica also mentioned she was treating a mother at the health center when the mother, quote, received several phone calls and messages that ICE agents had raided the apartment buildings right behind the facility. The patient was so distraught and in tears that treatment could not be completed that day because she needed to rush home to her other children. Imagine for a moment the fear that a mother must have felt receiving a call from her kids, scared and screaming that masked men are trying to break into their home. Is this America? Can you imagine the confusion and fear those children must have felt seeing those men at their door, wondering who they were and if they were there to hurt them or help them? And it's not just at health centers in Illinois. ICE is camping out in front of city halls, schools, churches, regularly outside of Home Depot, where they detained a father who is the sole provider for his 2 children, including a daughter with stage 4 cancer. Do you remember what led us into this situation? You heard it over and over at President Trump's rallies. Rapists, terrorists, murderers, criminally insane, sexual predators were coming across our border. Well, let me tell you, I'll sign up with the president. We don't want those people coming into this country, and if they commit a crime while they're here, they should be gone, period. Now let's talk about the others. The 11 million who've been in America, working jobs, raising families, going to church, paying their taxes. They're the ones they've targeted. 70% of the people who've been stopped by ICE in the state of Illinois, 70% of them have no criminal record whatsoever. They're not rapists and murderers and terrorists. They're people who overstayed a visa. And they may be American citizens. The ICE officers obviously don't distinguish any difference there. When will my colleagues on the other side of the aisle decide the cruelty and fear tactics of this administration must stop? This is America. When will they choose to put an end to the racial profiling which is going on and detention of even American citizens, including veterans and children? And this is all supposed to be about violent crime. It's not. Enough. If this was actually about reducing crime, President Trump would not be slashing programs that actually help local law enforcement. This cruelty is all for show. While Americans continue to pay inflated prices at the grocery store and face the prospect of skyrocketing health care premiums, this is what the president is focused on. Tearing families apart and separating kids from their parents. Our country is better than this. It is better than this cruelty and lawlessness. Now is the time for us to stand up for the rule of law and our Constitution. President Trump's claims of invasions, rebellions, emergency to justify calling the military into American cities are shameless attempts to bypass our constitutional checks and balances. It was the Republican governor of Oklahoma who said last week, if Governor Pritzker of Illinois tried to send his National Guard troops into Oklahoma, the people of Oklahoma and that governor, the Republican governor, would resist it. But that's exactly what's happening in my home state of Illinois. This president, without invitation, is sending National Guard troops in from Texas. The Supreme Court should stand up to this administration's attempt to cut both Congress and the courts out of decisions squarely given to them by the Constitution. Political opposition, peaceful protest, nonviolent civil disobedience are not rebellion. They are the bedrock of our democracy. Local law enforcement officials have proven they're capable in Illinois and most places of handling any unlawful or unruly behavior. As Illinois State Attorney General Kwame Raoul explained to the court, no protest activity in Illinois has rendered the president unable to execute federal law. If the Supreme Court enables Trump, President Trump, to deploy troops to American cities over the objection of state officials, before the courts rule on the legality of these actions, I fear it's going to cause lasting harm to America. I ask my Republican colleagues, are you really prepared in your home state for the next president, after President Trump, to send in troops to your state without permission, without consent of your government? Are you ready for masked soldiers to grab your constituents from their homes? My constituents elected me to represent them in this fight. I implore you to do the right by your constituents and push back against the president's illegal power grab before your state is the next victim. I yield the floor.